In the vast wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, rangers had been watching a remarkable pair of bobcats for 3 months. The female, heavy with life, hid deep inside a barren rock den, her breathing labored, her strength fading with each passing day. Close by, the male never left her side, steadfast as a shadow guarding every breath of his mate. Day after day, he roamed the wilds, bringing back rabbits and birds to sustain her weakening body. But on one fateful day, while the male was out hunting, the birth turned catastrophic. Evelyn Hartman and the rangers faced an impossible choice: let nature decide or intervene and risk everything to save a wild family. When the mother's strength was nearly gone, one ranger made a dangerous decision to step in, and it was in that very moment the male bobcat returned. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss any of our unexpected stories. The morning sun slowly rose over the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, casting long shadows. Across the Mesa Verde Wildlife Refuge in southwestern Colorado, veteran ranger Evelyn Hartman adjusted her binoculars, her eyes sweeping over the rugged terrain, a landscape she had known for nearly 2 decades. The refuge stretched across more than 3,000 acres of untouched wilderness, a sanctuary where the fierce yet delicate dramas of nature played out each day, most of them hidden from human eyes. The radio at her side crackled with a familiar static. "Evelyn, do you see what I'm seeing near Devil's Creek Canyon?" It was the voice of Marcus Hale, another seasoned ranger stationed at the North Lookout. The bobcat pair Evelyn answered firmly because she already knew. For 3 months, the rangers had been tracking an unusual pair that had made their den on a rocky ledge near the stream. What made them extraordinary wasn't just their choice to live so close to the ranger station, a rarity in itself, but the remarkable bond they shared. Bobcats are solitary by nature, coming together only briefly during mating season before going their separate ways. Yet this pair had remained together far longer than any fleeting courtship. The male, easily recognized by the notch in his left ear, a scar from an old territorial fight, had become a devoted provider, tirelessly bringing back prey for his mate heavy with pregnancy. "He's out hunting again," Marcus Hale reported over the radio, his voice edged with disbelief. "That's the 3rd time since sunrise. She must be close to giving birth." Evelyn Hartman adjusted her binoculars, focusing on the den. It was a natural rock shelter, partly hidden by jagged boulders and dense desert willow. At its entrance, the female bobcat lay stretched out, her flanks swollen and rising with each labored breath. Even from a distance, Evelyn could see the exhaustion etched into every tense line of her body. That July heat had arrived earlier and harsher than anyone could remember. The thermometer at the ranger station had already passed 90 degrees Fahrenheit, even though the sun had yet to reach its peak. Mountain streams, once reliable year-round, had dwindled into shallow trickles. The native grasses, normally green through summer, had turned brittle and yellow weeks ahead of time. The drought made hunting a brutal challenge for every predator in the refuge. Yet this male bobcat proved himself with a rare mastery. Through her binoculars, Evelyn Hartman tracked him as he returned from his latest hunt, a desert cottontail clamped firmly in his jaws. Every movement was precise, carrying an unwavering resolve. Each muscle worked in seamless rhythm as he crossed the rugged gravel-strewn terrain. Weighing nearly 30 pounds, he was the perfect embodiment of his kind. A tawny coat patterned with spots and stripes, a natural camouflage in a land caught between shadowed cover and blinding sunlight. The female slipped halfway out of the den to accept the offering. But instead of leaving immediately, as instinct would dictate, the male lingered, his eyes quietly fixed on his mate, a behavior unusual for a species known to exchange and part ways so quickly. He brushed her face with a fleeting lick before silently moving off, climbing onto a nearby outcrop that became his natural watchtower. From that vantage point, he could survey the den's entrance while staying close enough to react instantly to any threat. "Now that's a rare kind of devotion," murmured Daniel Cross, the newest member of the ranger team, as he stood beside Evelyn Hartman at the overlook. Fresh out of Colorado State University with a degree in wildlife biology, Daniel brought not only youthful energy but also the latest scientific knowledge. Still, he had much to learn when it came to reading the subtle signs of animal behavior in the wild. That's right, Evelyn nodded, lowering her binoculars.
2 decades.
In all my 20 years here, I've never seen anything like it.
We need to move on.
Normally,
Daniel.
a male bobcat would have left long ago to stake out his own territory. The afternoon dragged on beneath the stifling heat, thick and heavy, as if an invisible weight pressed down across the refuge. Metal equipment inside the ranger station grew too hot to touch, while waves of shimmering heat rose from the rocks, making the view through binoculars waver and distort. Evelyn Hartman noticed the female had retreated deeper into the den to escape the suffocating air. The male remained at his lookout. His breathing labored in the meager shade, yet his eyes never stopped, sweeping the landscape alert and unyielding. Around 4 in the afternoon, the weather turned without warning. Dark clouds gathered over the western peaks, swallowing the light and casting a heavy gloom across the sky. Within 10 minutes, the temperature had dropped more than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds howled through the dry creek bed, whipping dust into swirling columns of grit and shadow. Storms moving in fast. Marcus Hale's voice crackled over the radio. The Weather Center just issued a flash flood warning for the Auyos area. We need to alert every campground immediately. Evelyn Hartman relayed the message over the radio, but her eyes never left the bobcat's den. Something in the female's behavior had shifted. She staggered out of the shadows, pacing in tight circles at the entrance, her body trembling with restless, uneasy movements. Every few steps, her frame locked tight muscles, seizing under violent contractions, an unmistakable sign that labor had begun. "Daniel Cross, get the medical kit from the truck," Evelyn said, her voice low but carrying a sharp urgency. "And call Dr. Helena Graves at the Wildlife Veterinary Center. Tell her we may need her guidance right away." "You think we really have to intervene?" Daniel asked. His eyes wide, a mix of eagerness and unease flickering across his face. "I hope not," Evelyn replied slowly, though her seasoned gaze had already marked the mounting warning signs. The female's pacing quickened, edging toward desperation. Then came the sounds, low, guttural cries rising from her throat. Cries usually reserved for mating season or to warn off intruders, now twisted with pain, cutting through the air so sharply they clenched Evelyn's chest with a heavy wave of empathy. The male sensed it too. Abandoning his lookout, he moved closer to his mate, only to be driven back by a harsh growl. He dropped to the damp earth eyes of molten gold, locked on her gaze, burning with an intensity that felt almost human, like a soul gripped by unbearable fear for the one he loved. The first drops fell, heavy, striking the parched ground and bursting into countless tiny craters. Within moments, the rain became a pounding wall of water. Lightning split the darkened sky, followed by thunder that rolled and crashed through the canyon walls like artillery fire. The male bobcat darted beneath an overhanging rock for meager shelter, but the female paid no heed to the storm. Her body was now nothing but a vessel of pain racked by relentless contractions. Evelyn Hartman and Daniel Cross crouched beneath a small tarp strung between 2 junipers. Rain hammered down in torrents, but Evelyn's eyes never wavered from the female bobcat twisting in the grip of labor. Through the white curtain of rain, she could see the contractions growing fiercer, sharper. The animal strained, forcing her strength against the agony, only to collapse again onto the soaked ground, her breathing ragged and labored as if each gasp was draining the very life from her. The pattern repeated again and again, each wave of agony passing with no sign of a cub emerging. "How long has she been in active labor?" Dr. Helena Graves' voice came steady and professional over the radio, undisturbed by the storm's static. "At least an hour of intense contractions," Evelyn Hartman reported, tension sharpening her words. "She's exhausted. I'm seeing clear signs of collapse, excessive panting, dilated pupils, and her responsiveness to the environment is fading." First-time Mother Helena asked quickly. "We believe so, based on her age and body size," Evelyn replied. A heavy silence filled the channel, broken only by the endless drum of rain outside. Then Helena's voice returned, crisp and unyielding. "Bobcats usually deliver within 2 to 3 hours once true labor begins. If she's fighting this hard with no progress, it's highly likely one of the cubs is mispositioned. In the wild, that almost always means Helena didn't need to finish. Evelyn already knew the cold statistic. Birth complications were among the leading causes of death in wild cats. Without intervention, both mother and cubs could be lost. The rain now fell like a torrent, turning the once dry creek bed into a raging flood of mud and debris. The den sat higher up, but Evelyn could see the water beginning to push toward its mouth, threatening even that fragile shelter. The female bobcat collapsed onto her side flanks, heaving with ragged, desperate breaths. Her contractions came weaker, now scattered and feeble, carrying the weight of near hopelessness. "We have to do something," Daniel Cross burst out, his voice tight with urgency and laced with helplessness. Evelyn gripped her binoculars, her hands tense as she wrestled with the hardest decision of all. The core principle of wildlife management was clear: let nature decide. Human interference could disrupt the natural order, or worse, create dangerous dependence. But watching it unfold, the female pushed to the edge of survival, the male circling close with pained eyes and restless steps, like a tormented spirit. The iron rules suddenly felt fragile under the brutal weight of compassion. "Dr. Helena Graves, talk me through this," Evelyn said urgently into the radio, her voice breaking under the roar of the rain. "If this were a birth in captivity, how would you proceed? First, you check for an obstruction. If a cub is stuck in the birth canal, gentle manipulation can help. But Evelyn approaching a wild bobcat in labor, the stress alone could— I know the risks," Evelyn cut in, her voice firm. She turned to Daniel Cross. "Get Marcus Hale and Adrian Cole on the line. Tell them to bring the mobile blind and the darting gear. We won't sedate her, that could harm the cubs. But we need to be ready in case the male turns aggressive." While Daniel hurried to make the call, Evelyn tightened her gloves, steeling herself for what lay ahead. In her career, she had assisted in dozens of animal births, but never with a predator completely wild, and never under such brutal, uncontrolled conditions. The rain kept hammering down relentless, as if determined to crush the entire valley. Lightning ripped the sky apart, the blinding flash illuminating the scene before plunging it back into a suffocating darkness. Thunder roaring like a war drum through the storm. Marcus Hale and Adrian Cole arrived within 15 minutes, their truck skidding through the mud as if the road itself were trying to swallow them. Adrian Cole, a former Army medic who had seen battlefields before, finding a second career in wildlife management, took in the scene immediately, his eyes sharp, steady, and unshaken. "Never thought I'd end up delivering a bobcat," he muttered, snapping on a pair of rubber gloves with decisive precision. "We move slow. No sudden movements," Evelyn instructed firmly. "Marcus, you and Daniel set up the blind between us and the male. Don't block his sight completely. He needs to see we're not a threat, but the screen will give us a line of defense. Adrian, you're with me." The team moved into position with the practiced precision of people long accustomed to working under pressure. The mobile blind, little more than a sheet of camouflaged fabric, was raised, forming a partial barrier. From behind it, the male bobcat could still track their every move, but the distance and the screen gave the rangers a fragile layer of safety against the storm's fury. Evelyn Hartman spotted him, pressed tight against the rock face, his whole body wound taut like a bowstring drawn to its final notch, yet still holding back from aggression. His blazing eyes never left his mate. Evelyn stepped forward slowly, her voice low and steady, carrying like a lullaby through the storm. "Easy now, Mama. We're here to help. Just stay calm." The weary eyes of the female bobcat followed her every movement, but her strength was drained beyond resistance. Evelyn saw it at once. A tiny paw had emerged, but at a twisted, terrifying angle. "Breach," she murmured to Adrian Cole. "The first one's coming out backward." With absolute gentleness, Evelyn's practiced hands worked to adjust, easing the cub's body into a better position. The female bobcat stiffened a fleeting surge of instinctive resistance, then surrendered. Somewhere deep in her wild nature, she seemed to understand these strange beings had not come to harm her, but to save her. Or perhaps she was simply too drained to fight any longer. "All right," Evelyn whispered, her hands steady as iron as she felt the cub shift into alignment. "Come on, Mama." Just one more push. The mother's body convulsed with one final effort. And then suddenly the first cub slipped free into the world. A tiny drenched form dropped into Evelyn's waiting hands. She swiftly cleared away the membrane, and at last a fragile sound broke the storm. The cub's faint cry, thin but defiant, flared like a spark, breathing strength back into the mother. Instinct surged. She turned, pulling her newborn close, licking it fiercely, urging its first breaths into life. "One down," Adrian Cole whispered, relief flickering in his eyes. "She's contracting again." The second cub came more easily, and 20 minutes later the third arrived. Each time, Evelyn and Adrian intervened only as much as necessary to ensure safety, then stepped back, granting the mother the sacred space to bond with her newborns. The rain began to ease, leaving only thin rivulets winding around the den's entrance, reflecting the distant flashes of lightning. As the mother licked her third cub clean, the atmosphere shifted. A sharp cry of warning from Daniel Cross snapped Evelyn's attention around. The male was approaching, but it wasn't the furious charge they had all feared. He moved slowly, deliberately, every step weighted with intent. Clamped in his jaws was a wood rat, a prize hunted in the heart of the storm. His golden eyes did not glance at the humans. They fixed only on his family, on the three fragile lives stirring weakly beside their mother. "No one moves." Evelyn Hartman ordered, her voice low and sharp as a blade. The male bobcat dropped his prey at the mouth of the den, then froze, shoulders raised in taut vigilance, as if weighing every breath around him. His gaze swept slowly across the humans, over the three fragile lives that had only just entered the world, and finally settled on his exhausted mate. Evelyn held her breath, her heart pounding. She knew this moment would decide everything. Would their intervention be seen as an act of mercy, or forever branded as an unforgivable trespass? Then, in a motion that blurred Evelyn's eyes with sudden emotion, the male simply walked past them. No aggression, no fear, only slow, deliberate steps carrying the weight of a father returning to his family. He lowered himself beside his mate, gently grooming her weary face as their three cubs nursed. Beneath the fading light of the storm's retreat, that scene, a new family bound by devotion and primal instinct, became one of the most sacred and beautiful moments Evelyn had ever witnessed in her entire career. "Let's go," she whispered to the team, her voice slow and gentle, as if afraid to shatter the living portrait of motherhood and fatherhood before them. The Rangers withdrew in silence, packing up their equipment with the softest movements, careful not to disturb the fragile moment they had just witnessed. At the truck, Evelyn Hartman turned for one last look. The male bobcat stood guard at the den's entrance, a figure both wary and calm, like a silent sentinel protecting his family. Inside, beneath the clearing sky, the female curled herself around three tiny forms, their small bodies rising and falling in steady, healthy breaths. "So what now?" Daniel Cross asked, his voice full of awe and humility at the miracle he had just seen. "Now, we watch from a distance," Evelyn answered, steady yet moved. "We'll need to make sure there's enough prey in the area. And we'll coordinate with the hunting management team to minimize human activity here for the next few months." The cubs would need time to grow, to find their strength before facing the brutal trials of life in the wild. In the weeks that followed, the Rangers kept careful watch. They recorded every milestone in the Bobcat family's progress the moment the tiny eyes opened around the 10th day. Their first steps out of the den in the 4th week, and their initiation into the hunt at 3 months old, learning the craft of predators under their parents' guidance. The male continued his devoted role, bringing food for his mate with steady regularity, and as the cubs grew, patiently teaching them the vital hunting skills they would need to survive. Evelyn Hartman submitted a detailed report to the Colorado Division of Wildlife, recommending special protective status for the land surrounding the den, a territory that had become a symbol of resilience and of rare parental devotion in the world of wildcats. The report quickly stirred the interest of biologists across the United States. The male's extraordinary care for his young, an act rarely ever documented among bobcats, became the center of scientific attention. Several grants were approved, allowing the rangers to continue monitoring the bobcat family for years to come, always with absolute respect for natural distance. The experience left an indelible mark on Daniel Cross. Moved to his core, he resolved to dedicate his entire career to the conservation of wild cats. In time, Daniel went on to found a non-profit organization devoted to protecting the critical habitats of bobcats and mountain lions across the Rockies. And whenever he recounted his journey, he always spoke of that stormy afternoon, the defining moment that set his life and ideals on a new path. Adrian Cole carried the experience into his wilderness first aid training courses, teaching new generations of rangers that sometimes the line between intervention and interference is not as clear as the textbooks suggest. He emphasized that compassion, when guided by knowledge and respect, can illuminate the way through the hardest field decisions. Marcus Hale, meanwhile, told the story in local school programs, offering children a lasting lesson that wild animals, though different from us, still hold their own sacred forms of family bonds and devotion. The story of the bobcat pair became legend across Colorado, inspiring countless young people to pursue careers in wildlife conservation. But no one was more deeply changed than Evelyn Hartman. The image of the male bobcat choosing trust over aggression, accepting help so that his mate could survive the brink of death, etched itself into her memory, a vision that would never fade throughout the rest of her career. Years later, Evelyn often returned to the high overlook above Devil's Creek where the story had begun. From there, she quietly watched the once fragile cubs grow into independent hunters and eventually disperse to claim new territories, continuing the eternal cycle of their mysterious species. The male and female remained together, defying every typical pattern of bobcat behavior. The following year, they raised another litter, this time without complication. Locals began calling them the bonded pair of Mesa Verde, their story becoming the subject of documentaries and scientific studies alike. Yet, despite the attention, they remained what they had always been: untamed, unbroken, and free. Years later, when Evelyn Hartman officially retired, she stood before the grand banquet of the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Society. In her speech, she spoke of the animals she had encountered, of victories and failures of nature's harsh edges, and its moments of unexpected grace. But as her words drew to a close, Evelyn chose a single story to leave behind. That storm-struck afternoon when human hands helped 3 bobcat cubs into the world, and when a male, instead of choosing fury, chose trust. A devoted father, a sacred moment, and proof that sometimes even in the wild's fiercest storms there is room for a quiet companionship between humanity and the untamed. We are stewards of these wild lands, Evelyn concluded, her voice echoing through the hall, not their masters. Our role is to protect, to preserve, and sometimes, only sometimes, to reach out a hand when nature's courage needs just a touch of human compassion to see it through. That day we were not rangers or scientists. We were simply living beings sharing in the most fundamental miracle of life. And in that moment, the line between humanity and the wild did not divide us. It bound us in the deepest way possible. The hall rose to its feet in thunderous applause, the sound rolling like storm clouds across the room. But Evelyn's mind was no longer there. It had returned to that mountainside long ago, to the storm that lashed the earth, to the trembling weight of newborn lives in her hands, to the mother's exhausted, grateful eyes, and to the extraordinary trust of the male who understood that, even in the wild, sometimes we all need a little help. The story of that bobcat family had become far more than a rare birth in nature. It stood as proof of the emotional depth within wild animals, of the power of conservation, rooted in compassion, and of the fragile yet sacred balance between human intervention and the eternal rhythm of the natural world. It became a reminder to all who heard it that in the vast wilderness of the Rockies, where the harsh law of survival reigns, love and devotion can still take root in ways humanity is only beginning to understand. The following year, Mesa Verde Wildlife Refuge was officially expanded to include critical new habitats for bobcats and other predators. The land surrounding Devil's Creek was placed under special protection, becoming a vital site for bobcat behavioral research and a source of invaluable data that helped shape conservation strategies across the American West. But beyond the numbers and scientific reports, the story had grown into a symbol of hope, a testament that when humanity approaches nature with respect, knowledge, and compassion, true miracles can unfold. Over the years, there were occasional reports of sightings of the once fragile cubs now grown independent and ruling territories of their own. Some observers even claimed to have seen other bobcat pairs forming similar bonds, males who did not leave but stayed devoted, steadfast through pregnancy and birth. Whether this was learned behavior or simple coincidence remained a matter of scientific debate. But one truth was beyond question. The impact of that storm-lashed afternoon on those who stood witness and on countless others who later heard the tale endured far beyond the bounds of a single natural event. The storm that once threatened tragedy had instead ushered in new life, and the human hands that reached out in that moment had forged an unexpected bond between two worlds that usually remain apart. In the end, the miracle was not only that 3 bobcat cubs survived against the odds. The greater miracle was the moment when humans and the wild discovered perfect understanding, a fragile yet eternal bridge across the divide between species. A bridge built only of compassion, courage, and the universal belief that love's power can transcend every boundary of life itself.